Hello friends, Adam here with FED. I was writing some notes for a Three Houses video about why Fire Emblem Three Houses is probably the best game in the series to be a squishy mage in, but a large part of that idea has to do with a concept that deserves its own video, really. And that's what we are talking about today. What makes a Fire Emblem game player phase focused or enemy phase focused? And really this is kind of an arbitrary thing, but people talk about it and I think it's an interesting discussion regardless. I think there are a couple things that really determine whether or not a game is player phase focused or enemy phase focused. And when I say player phase focused, I mean most of the action or the most important things you do take place on player phase compared to an enemy phase focus where most of the combat or the most important combat happens on enemy phase. So I think number one is enemy quality and number two is player quality or player unit quality, which may sound like they kind of coincide with each other, and they do. But I think there are some specific examples that stand out to mean make these mean different things. So enemy quality, games like Three Houses, where the enemies are insane, right? You have sword masters with 56 speed or whatever, and armor knights or whatever, or great knights with like a bazillion defense, and they're just really hard to kill. Or there's enemies that are fast enough to double you and one round pretty much every unit on your team, right? Unless you specifically build someone to be tanky, they're not going to survive. That is really high enemy quality, and I think that makes Three Houses player phase focused, where your most important moves, your most important combat is going to take place on player phase. And I think that also comes down to things like you have gambits to lock enemies down, skill attacks like Banshee to reduce movement, Enclosure to reduce movement and lock enemies down, Silence to lock enemy mages down. Essentially, it comes down to like wanting to avoid combat on enemy phase more often than not, unless you have like a dodge tank or you specifically built a Fortress Knight or Great Knight or something to have a lot of defense. More often than not, you just want to avoid enemy phase combat, right? And I think you see a similar thing in like Fire Emblem Fates Conquest or like Shadow Dragon Hard 5, where you want to avoid combat on enemy phase where possible and then take care of things on player phase. Now on the opposite side of that, there are games that have enemy quality that's really, really low. The first one that came to mind was Path of Radiance. Fire Emblem Path of Radiance has some of the weakest enemies in the series, right up there with like Blazing Sword, where pretty much any unit is going to be very usable and going to be very capable of handling multiple enemy units on enemy phase. And the enemy spam is really high too, and that leans more into the enemy phase nature of Path of Radiance. So player phase is more about just like positioning your units in a way that's going to allow them to see the most combat on enemy phase in a lot of instances, especially later in the game. So Path of Radiance is a really good example of an enemy phase focused game because enemy quality is so low. And again, I think Blazing Sword or Blazing Blade or whatever, the 7th entry in the series, I think that's another good example of that. I think Sacred Stones also leans into that a little bit. But and of course there's other examples. I think you could make an argument for parts of FE3 being that way or Echoes being that way as well. But I feel like those are less extreme examples compared to like Path of Radiance and Blazing Sword. Now the second one is player unit quality, and that may seem like, of course, if your player unit quality, like you put it like they should just directly compare to each other, and that's how you should decide if a game is enemy focused or enemy phase focused or player phase focused. But I think they are distinct and different enough for reasons that I'll talk about in a second to have them be separate reasonings. So as far as player unit quality and being like a player phase game, I think of Radiant Dawn Part 1 and some of Part 3 are probably the most poignant examples in the series, at least in my mind. You have really weak, squishy units in the beginning of Part 1, where Micaiah and Edward and Leonardo can hardly see combat on enemy phase, especially on hard mode. and most of your combat will be taking place on player phase, so that you can, you know, not die, because your units are just so weak. And I feel like you have that throughout a lot of Radiant Dawn on hard mode, but it's really particularly in the first 4 or 5 chapters of Radiant Dawn, just up until you get your Zyhark and your Volugs, Jills, Tyronio, all those people that can handle some enemy phase combat, but you're still going to have to position and make very careful plays on player phase to avoid enemy combat on enemy phase. And that's up until later in the game when you get like Ike and friends, and then they can just kind of stomp through the game. And then you get to like part 4, where I feel like it's very enemy phase focused, because there's so many enemies, the spam is just too high. And now on the flip side of the player unit quality coin, enemy phase focused game, I think Genealogy of the Holy War is like peak this. Genealogy of the Holy War gives you units that are so busted that it basically makes it so you can just put them in the middle of entire like seas of enemies, just entire swaths, entire brigades. You can just put them in the middle of hundreds of enemies and they would be fine, because that's just kind of how it works. You put Sed with whole Seti in the middle of everything, he just murders everything. You put Ares in the middle of stuff with Mistletoe, and he may not be as dodge tanky, but he'll still kill a lot of things, and he has so much HP that he'll probably survive for quite a while. Or even, then you got, of course, like Seliph, Sigurd are good examples of that. They're like their quality is just incredibly high. So yeah, I think Awakening is another good example of that, where you have Robin, who, despite the enemy quality being high, especially on like Lunatic, the going strat still tends to be you just make Robin as good as possible and then just let the enemies kind of run into them, right? And if you're playing on like normal or hard, that's kind of the case for all of your units. So, because this player unit quality is just so high in Awakening compared to a lot of other games. Now, last thing, I think there is something to be said about unit placement. It's not as big a factor in my mind as these other 2 things that we talked about, but I think unit placement does play a part in whether or not the game is enemy phase focused or player phase focused. And I think the biggest things are whether or not you have like these clusters of weak enemies, or these, or you have like really strong enemies off by themselves, or you have clusters of incredibly strong enemies. Because I think if you have, clusters of weak enemies, enemy phase game. And you look at Genealogy of the Holy War, you have these just like kind of clusters of, 10 or so units that are all moving towards your army, and you just kind of send your dudes out there and let them murder them on enemy phase, generally. But then you look at, say, Three Houses, and maybe Fire Emblem Fates Conquest as some bit of this as well, where there'll be a grouping of enemies, like 3 or 4 really powerful enemies that you don't really want to be in range of all of them at one time, maybe one of them at most. So like as to not die. So I think that's a thought as well. And then of course, that'd be more player phase focused, and I don't know, that's just a last minute thought I had as I was recording this. So yeah, what do you guys think? What makes a game player phase focused versus like enemy phase focused? Do you think games like Three Houses are one or the other? Do you think this is a stupid discussion? Do you think it's completely pointless? I'm curious what y'all think. And please make sure to like the video before you leave, subscribe to the channel, all that. I really, really appreciate it. And if you're feeling crazy, you can click the join button that's by the subscribe button. And you can, you can pay a couple dollars to support the channel, and hey, you get some cool emotes you can use in the comments and also in stream chats. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll catch you next time.